that impacts you.
Sorry.
That's quite all.
It's
I'll
going
start that
on.
again.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about tonight about how posture can impact your health and your health span, why that's important to you, and give you some simple tips and techniques that you can do. Now, just before we get started, as anybody who's live on the call tonight, if anybody has got any particular mobility issues, like being able, like standing up or being able to move your arms up and around, and also if you have any issues, if I just roll myself back a wee bit here, to be able to get access to your foot. Now, you don't have to have your foot up on your leg like this. You could have it resting on a chair or something in front of you. But if anybody has that mobility issue, please do let me know, so I can adapt to the class as I go. I am very used to working with people with lots of different movement and health concerns, so I just can do things off the cuff. So I'm just going to check if there's anything, anyone there. Right, I'm not seeing anything in particular. So anything that we do this evening, if it doesn't feel right in your body, then honour your body. We are all unique individuals. Our history of movement is what creates the shape and the alignment that we live with in this moment. So if you have been a dancer in your younger years, your posture will be very different to somebody who was maybe a runner, somebody who's maybe had a seated job for most of their life, versus somebody who's been standing and moving around for most of their time. There's no, what is the word I'm looking for? There's no ideal or perfect shape. There is whatever shape there is for you. But there are common problems that can happen within the body. Now, most of life happens in front of us. So for a lot of people, we see a lot of head dropping forward, shoulders rounded, creating this hump in the lower back. Another thing that's really common, particularly in women, we'll just lose my head for a second here when I stand up, is this deep lumbar curve called lordosis, where the tailbone sticks out, and that can cause problems in the lower back. Other things that we commonly see is people being quite lopsided, so we have a tendency to lean into one side of our body more than the other, and that can be determined by which hand is your dominant hand, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Your postural alignment is really important for your overall balance. There was a study that came out, I was going to say 10 years ago, but it could have been 15 or 20 years because time just flies past so quickly, that showed that if somebody fell and broke their hip, they only had a 33% chance of full recovery. The other sort of 67% was split between people being left wheelchair bound or bed bound and dying within the year. So falling and breaking your hip could have quite severe outcomes. But if you can prevent that fall happening in the first place, then that's going to have a positive, because prevention is always better than the cure. Right, that's absolutely fine about the trapped nerve and the foot issue. That is fine. I will adjust that. So what I want you to do right at this moment in time, without thinking about correcting anything or changing anything, I want you to notice how you're holding yourself. So if you're in a chair, I want you to notice, where is your head in relation to your shoulder. So if you could see yourself side on, where is your ear in relation to the shoulder? Then I want you to think about the torso of your body. How straight or how rounded are we here? And again, I don't want you to correct it. I want you to notice what your habit is when you're not thinking about things, when you're just being in presence. And then if you're seated, if you're sitting in a chair, I want you to notice the angle at your hip joint. So are your knees lower or higher than your hip in your seated position? And then how are your legs arranged? So are you sitting with your legs crossed? Are you sitting with your ankles crossed? Are you sitting with your legs twisted up? Are you sitting with your legs out in front? And there's no right or wrong here. How we sit to be comfortable is how we sit to be comfortable. We're just exploring what our actual habits in this moment are. So once you've got an idea of that, what I want you to think about is, where do you experience any kind of pain or discomfort in your body? So do you have a niggling hip, or a niggling back, or shoulder, or neck, or even your knee or your ankle? So just having a wee think about, where do you, if you have any kind of aches and pains, where do they most commonly present themselves within your body? And that might be something that's there all the time. It might be something that comes and goes. So being aware of that as well. Some people will say, oh, I've got this sore back and it's sore all the time. But then when you start paying attention to throughout the day, you go, oh, actually it's sore when I got up in the morning. And then once I'm up and moving around, it eases off. But then if I've been sitting for a prolonged period of time, the pain starts to come back. So it's being able to notice, what are your common complaints, and when do they start to occur? Because your posture can be part of the reason that how you hold yourself can influence where we build pain or build resistance to pain. Other things that posture impacts, we've got our aesthetics. So if you see somebody that holds themselves tall, they tend to look slimmer. They tend to look quite graceful in their movements. Our posture can also influence our breathing rate. Now, our breathing rate will then influence our blood pressure, anxiety levels, depression levels, how we digest our food, and also how our body clears toxins out the system, so our lymphatic system. So we think just how we're holding ourselves is just how the bones are all arranged in our body, but actually it has a knock-on effect and a knock-on influence to everything else going on in our body. So the next thing that I want you to do is, just for maybe about a minute, I want you to get up and just move around the room that you're in. So just go about whatever a normal task would be, but while you're moving around, what I want you to notice is the sound that your feet make as you walk around. I want you to notice the weight of your steps as you're stepping around. And again, don't try and change anything. Don't try and make it perfect, because there is no perfect. We're looking for what your habits are. So noticing the sound, noticing the weight as your feet transfer across the ground. Notice where your hips sit, where your ribs sit, your shoulders and your head. So if you're going to do that just now, just have a move around so that you can start to get a wee assessment of what your normal habits and habitual movement patterns are. Do you land through one foot heavier than you land through the other? What sort of sounds do you hear as your feet are hitting the ground? Is there any pain, any discomfort? Are you feeling or sensing anything in your body as you're doing that? And we're not looking for any right or wrongs. We're just looking for what your habits are, what is going on for you in your body right now. I'm just going to stand up for a moment and step back so that you get a fuller picture of me. So what they would call an anatomically correct posture is, you're standing tall, your chin is slightly drawn in so that the back of the neck's long. If you were seeing yourself in a mirror, ear stacked over the shoulder, stacked over the hip, over the knee, over the ankle. Your ribs would be tucked in so that the ribs are stacked over the pelvis. The pelvis would be in a neutral-ish position, and what that means is you're not sticking the tailbone out, but equally you're not pushing the pubic bone forward. So we're not looking for any kind of sway forward or hinge back. And what is very common to see, is, especially as we mature through life, is our body starts to get tenser and tighter and it pulls us down. Our head starts to shift forward, our shoulders are rounding, the head is well ahead of the hips, and then when you're walking around, this more bent forward position, and I'm just exaggerating it for the purposes of being on the camera. Even a subtle shift forward when you're moving around can really change how your balance is. So if your head is ahead of your hips, you're not going to notice if you trip over something, and then you're much more likely to tumble over and fall. Whereas if you're in a more upright position and you trip, because your head's further back, you've not got that forward motion and momentum that's going to keep you going. So you're more likely to be able to catch yourself, to hold yourself up. So when we're moving around, we want to think about that. One of my teachers said, lead from the heart when you're walking around. So if you're going to a destination, if you lead from the heart rather than the head, that's going to help just naturally with your alignment. And I was walking through my local shopping centre a couple of years ago now, and my head was already in the post office. I was thinking about where I was going, what I was doing, and I was walking. I didn't notice that there was wet floor, slippy wet floor signs all over the place. And my front foot went forwards, and I kind of went into the splits and ended up down on one knee, gliding down the floor, which I thought was quite funny. But the wee man that was doing all the mopping up came running up to me. Oh my goodness, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I said to him, my head was already in the post office. I didn't see any of those signs. Had I been present where I was in that moment with my head further back, I would have noticed those signs and I would have been more careful with my footing. So posture can influence whether or not we've fallen injured ourselves or not. Another thing that standing with this tall posture, it creates space in the abdomen. I've already mentioned about your breath. If we are hunched over here, then the breath's going to get stuck in the top of the chest. So you could even exaggerate how you're positioned right now, round the shoulders, let the rib cage drop down, and take a couple of breaths and place your hands maybe at the lower ribs and just take a couple of breaths and notice what happens. And then start to lift through the spine. Draw the chin in slightly and take a couple of breaths there. And notice the difference. So your ribs might move a little bit more when you're in that more upright position. You might notice if you're really jammed up, if you've been hunched down for many years and the tissues are all really stuck, as you try and sit up, if the tissues are really stuck together, there might still be some restriction there. But in this abdominal area here, as long as you've not had any organs removed, you've got your spleen and stomach, which sit on your left side. You've got your liver, which is on the right, comes across. The pancreas is in the middle at the back. We've got our small and large intestines in here, reproductive organs down in the pelvic area if you've not had them removed. So you've got all of these organs sitting in this area. So when you take a breath in, if the rib cage expands out, then what happens is the diaphragm muscle, which sits from rib to rib, and from the front of the body to the back of the body in this big dome, pushes down as you inhale, create this space, it squashes all these organs together. Then as you exhale, that diaphragm pulls up, lifts up into the rib cage, so it then is massaging the lungs and the heart, but it's pulling all these organs apart to give them space. So you're getting this internal massage every time you take full diaphragmatic breaths, which you can only do if your posture's in this upright position. So if anybody's got digestive issues, reflux, constipation, indigestion, diarrhea, just sluggish bowels, anything like that, one of the first things that I get my clients to do is notice how are you holding your posture and are you breathing as fully as you can, because these two things are going to have a really, really deep impact on that. Also with the blood pressure, if the lungs can't expand and contract, then the heart's not being massaged. So if the lungs inflate and they wrap around your heart, give it a wee hug, and then as you're exhaling, it releases and lets and lets go. So it's really nice to think that your organs are all hugging, massaging each other inside the cavities. But if you're not being able to get those full breaths because of how you're holding yourself, that's going to have an impact. Head position, as I said before, if your head is sitting forward, when you're walking, the risk of falling is more. But also as we sit forward, that's going to then close off the space for you to be able to take nasal breaths and full breaths just at the back of the neck. What also happens is the muscles that sit at the back of the neck start to get messages that they're not really needed anymore. And then what your body does is down regulates anything that is very energy dense. So it switches those muscles off, lets them shrivel up and shrink, and then lays down connective tissue, fascia, to act as a sling and a support. So then it builds scaffolding around this area and can make the neck really stiff and tight. So then drawing the chin back in and start to feel problematic. As we draw that chin back in, we open all the airways at the back. We also improve the blood flow that comes up into the brain to feed our brain, and the toxin flow back out so that your body can detox. So if there's any risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, memory loss, brain fog, that head position is going to be really influential, because we want all the blood with the oxygen coming up through the arteries to feed the brain, and we want the lymphatic system and the veins to be clear and be able to clear out all the waste products. So we're going to have a wee check-in to see how our necks are feeling, and then I'm going to give you this really fun, magic little technique that you can do to help free up the tension. So if you sit as tall as is comfortable for you, or if you prefer to stand, you can stand up. I want you just to turn your head slowly from one side to the other, and I want you to notice your neck. How does your neck feel? Is your neck feeling stiff? Do you have smoother movement to one side than you do the other? As you're turning, do you notice any little bits of your neck that feel like it's catching? Do you maybe feel it down into the shoulders? Do you feel it maybe across the chest or across the back? We'll just do it one more time round, just in that assessment phase, bringing it back to centre. And then you're going to get your hands, and then this, I'm just going to move closer to my camera. So where you've got the curly cartilage around your ear, we're just going to start to massage and gently unroll that, and then let it roll back in, and just pulling your ear away. So doing both of them at the same time. When we're doing this, we're getting lots of acupressure points around your ear. Connective tissue in our body, so our fascia comes right out, covers every single part of our body, from the soles of the feet to the crown of the head to the tips of the fingers. So we're influencing that. And while you're doing this, I want you to take some nice deep breaths in and out. So when your elbows are out wide, the chest is open, that's allowing the breath to get in. It's nice and smooth with the breath. And then just go round the ear one more time. And then let the hands come down. And then I just want you to move your head again and notice. So every time I do this, I always feel like my neck has freed up so much that I could almost do a 360 like an owl. I call that the magic ears technique. And you can do that as often as your neck feels stiff and sore. So if your range of movement is really, really short, I would do that as often as you remember, just to help start freeing things up. Because if your neck is stiff, it makes it more challenging to be able to bring the chin into that alignment. Now we're going to think about the shoulders, across the shoulders. I want you just to notice where your shoulders are sitting right now. If you can see yourself in the camera, you can have a wee notice that when you look at yourself, where are your shoulders sitting in line? Maybe you can see something in the background that you go, right, I'm in line with this shelf, or I'm in line with this picture. We're then going to bring one hand up And we're going to, this muscle here that sits from the shoulder across the top of the shoulder, comes up into the neck, that's your trap muscle. We're going to make a claw with our hand and grip onto that space. Now, for some of you, this is where you're going to, this will be as much as you do today, depending on the mobility of your shoulder and what feels right in your body. Now, if you've got arthritis in your hands or your hands get really sore, then what I want you to do is just pinch a couple of times and then let your hand relax. And then pinch a couple of times and then let your hand relax. Don't keep gripping on if it's causing any pain in any of your fingers. But you might want to pinch and release anyway so that you can notice how dense or how pliable this muscle here is. Quite often, this is where we feel the weight of the world on our shoulders, is up around these trap muscles. Now we're going to take the other hand, we're going to place it onto the elbow, and then I want you to think about rotating the bone out and away from the body. So here, twisting out. If for any reason this doesn't feel right for you, then you can take that hand away and just stay with your elbow up and take a rest at any point you need. I just want you to take a few deep breaths in and out as you're doing this. And notice how this feels. And this might be where you stay, or you might want to come with me and add a little bit of movement in, which the movement in is circling round. So using this other hand to help push the elbow round. So as you're coming up, you're trying to lift up as high as you can and coming down. And again, notice how does your body respond to this. If it's not happy, don't force it. We're looking to try and release pain and tension. And if you've had frozen shoulder or any kind of nerve impingements around the shoulder, this might be more challenging to do. Let's change the direction if you're doing the circles. Notice if you're holding your breath, and if you are, can you let that go and let the breath come in and out? Now we're going to change direction again, and I'm going to give you an option to add on. So the option to add on would be to come up to standing. Take the feet wider than your shoulders, and then can you make that movement as big as you can? So going up as high to the ceiling and then down towards the floor. So this is just another layer, another option. You do not need to add this in, only if it's what feels right for you today. Now you're still twisting that elbow out the way as you're doing this. Now we're going to change direction one last time. Nice deep breaths all the way in, all the way out. And then one more time round. When you get back up to the top, if you were rotating that elbow out, release it. If you still had the hand up, let it come down. And then I just want you to notice how that shoulder feels. Now, I've already done that today with my class this morning, and my shoulder felt like it had dropped this morning. I've done it again this evening, and my shoulder feels like it's dropped again. So it might now feel like your shoulders are kind of sitting lopsided, like this. Getting some nods there, yep. So that means we have to balance things out. So making that claw, coming up on the other side, and just start with the pinch. And notice how this side feels. So nothing in our body is symmetrical. We've got asymmetry everywhere. This might be your dominant hand, it might be your less dominant hand. This might be a shoulder that you've injured at some point, it might not be. So we just take our time coming into it. Is this okay? How does this hand feel? Because maybe this hand isn't as happy as the other hand. Can we take some deep breaths in and out there? And then decide on this side, do we want to add the opposite hand onto the elbow and twisting it out? And does that still feel okay? And just take a couple of breaths with it. Always just doing that reassessment. Is my body happy with this in this moment? And then maybe we start to add the circles in here. But remember, maybe we don't. And there's no judgment, there's just curiosity. Well, if this side isn't wanting to play. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why that is. Or maybe you know exactly. Change the direction if you're doing these circles. How is your breath? If you've started to hold it, can you let the breath go? And then maybe you want to stand up and go wider. So feet wider than the shoulders, just to give you a nice base of support. And as high to the ceiling as you can, and out as wide as you can. Let the spine and the ribs follow. And if it doesn't feel right on this side, then you just go back a stage. One more and then change in direction. One more, all the way around. When you get back up to the top, you can release that elbow, we can bring that arm down, and we can have a check-in. How does that feel? So just noticing. Might feel like the chest feels a bit more open. The shoulders hopefully feel more balanced, more level with each other. And then if we think about that positioning, so the chin slightly drawn in, so we're not tucking it in so much that we're cutting off our airways, we're just drawing in so that the back of the neck's nice and long, ear over the shoulders. The shoulders are now just a bit softer, allowing that chest to be more open. And just thinking about, does that feel nice? We're then going to think about, come down the body and start to think about our ribs. So where are our ribs sitting? Are the ribs sitting thrusted forward, the chest up and out? Are they dropped down and collapsed? Are they somewhere in between? When we start to think about the ribs moving, how much movement does it feel like we have? Can we think about sending that breastbone back to let the shoulders round forward and then bring it back and then lift the breastbone and let the shoulders drop back? So can we get this movement? And if we think about at the back of the body, your shoulder blade sits on top of your rib cage. As you're doing that, how much does that shoulder blade feel like it's gliding across the top of the ribs? Does it feel like the spine, particularly from the base of the neck down to the bottom of the rib cage, how much movement do you feel like you're getting there? So can you get this sense of rounding as you go forward and then arching as you go back? Each of the vertebrae sits stacked on top of each other, but the joints should have a little bit of movement going forward and back. How much do we have there? And then if we also think about the lumbar region of the spine, so this lower part that sits between the bottom of the rib cage and your pelvis, can we tuck the tailbone under so we're getting this rounding and then getting this arching without collapsing or dropping into the lower back? So there shouldn't be any pain or discomfort, particularly in that lower part of the spine as you round and as you lift. Can you get a sense of some movement there? Now, what I want you to do is to round, and as you're taking a breath in, I want you to think about breathing into the back of the body. The rib cage sits into your spine, like fingers coming in. So as we're taking that inhale, the rib cage expands out. Those ribs hopefully are moving a little bit further away from the spine. And then as you're breathing out, they're coming back in. So just send that breath into the back of the body. And then as you're breathing out, I want you to come up to a sitting position. And then we're going to take that the opposite way. So we're going to lift the chest, drop the shoulders back. You might bring your hands towards your lower back. So we're opening through the front of the body. And then trying to take a deep breath in here. So again, we're thinking about those ribs. shifting out and away from the breastbone so that we're opening at the front. As you're breathing out, bring it back to the centre, and then rounding the spine. If any of you do Pilates or yoga, this is like a seated version of a cat and cow posture. So rounding that spine, can we take an inhale? Exhale, come back up into a seated position. Take the hands behind and then lift. Take an inhale, and then let's bring it back to the centre. Have a notice, how do the ribs feel as they're stacking over that pelvis? We're going to take the spine into a little bit of rotation. So what I want you to do, so your spinal column starts at the base of the back of the skull, comes all the way down and inserts into the back of the pelvis. And in there, you've got all these vertebral discs. So what I want you to try and visualize in your head, as you're starting to turn your skull and then come down the neck, each of those vertebrae releasing off and starting to come into a twist one at a time. So length into the spine, turning. As you come down the neck, and we start to come past the shoulders, to past the collarbones, the shoulders might want to have one coming forward, one moving back. We're coming down through the breastbone, so the breastbone's starting to rotate. The ribs are starting to follow, so we're slowly going down those ribs, down into the waist. Your hands might want to go, one hand coming across the front and the other hand coming behind you as you're looking over your shoulder. And can we take a nice deep breath in here? So the breath will be restricted because we're in this spiral. And then as we're breathing out, we're going to start from the waist, slowly come back up. So start to release the waist. And notice where your body wants to jump ahead quickly and say, well, if I bring my shoulders down faster, we get back to the beginning faster. We're not looking to get there quickly. We're trying to get there one vertebral disc at a time. So we're coming up through the rib cage, through that breastbone, through the shoulder space, up into the neck. So slowly, slowly the head comes back last, and then starting to turn to the other side. So we're turning, and then the shoulders are going to start to follow, collarbones, the breastbone. And as you're going round to this side, you might notice that the movement is more free, or it might be more restricted, depending on which side you have a preference to rotating to. It's nice to explore, to see where we're holding tension, where we have freedom of movement, where things are maybe not so free. And then as we're coming back from the waist, slowly up through the spine, through the ribs, through the breastbone, the shoulders, then the neck, and then to centre. So we'll do that one more time to each side. Now sometimes it can feel nice to have your eyes closed to really try and get this internal connection to what is going on, rather than noticing the visuals of what's happening round about. So as you're exhaling, just slowly starting to turn that head. And if you don't like doing this with your eyes closed, if it makes you feel dizzy, then feel free to keep them open. But just, can you get that sense of each of those discs slowly coming down? Notice where things might feel sticky, where maybe you're holding some resistance or tension. Notice also where your body's trying to jump ahead and go, it's easier if I move here. Your body's always looking for the path of least resistance. So we're exploring the body to see where those paths creep in because there's tension somewhere. And then in your own time, and if you're still making your way round, take your own time going round. But if you've already got to the end point, then we're slowly coming back from the bottom, slowly working your way up the spine. Making sure that the head's coming back last. And then just one more time round, over to that other side. Just working your way down the spine. How does this side feel compared to the other side? Is this the easy side? Is this the more challenging side? Does it feel any different now that you're on that second time round? And as you come back, remember we're starting from the bottom, slowly making your way up. Through the ribs, through the breastbone, through the chest, the shoulders, the neck, with the head coming back round. And then I just want you to notice whatever there is to notice in your body here. So how tall do you feel like you're sitting? And it's okay if you're starting to feel tired when you're doing something that's new. The muscles that haven't been used to working can use a lot of energy, and that connection from the brain to those body parts can use a lot of energy as well. So if you're thinking, gee whiz, I've hardly moved my body and I'm starting to feel really tired, that's okay. That's just your body learning new things, and it is quite energy dense doing that. But I want you to just see if bringing your chin in with the shoulders, the chest open, the shoulders relaxed, those ribs tucked in so that they're stacked over the pelvis. Has that started to allow this space to feel a little bit more open, a little bit free? When you bring your awareness into your breath again, as you're taking those breaths in, does that feel different to when we first checked in earlier on? Does it feel like maybe there's a little bit more movement, a little bit more expanse? And sometimes it can help just to place your hands back onto the ribs again. As you're taking that breath in, you maybe feel more of the ribs coming out into your hands, filling out into the tissues of your body, into the fitting of your clothes. And as you're breathing out, just letting the ribs gently come back in. So if that breath is starting to get a little bit deeper, getting a little bit more movement, then remember those organs that I spoke about earlier, they are getting that nice internal massage. The next part that we're going to look at is the pelvis. Now I'm going to do this standing up. You can do this standing or seated. If you are sitting, you might want to come forward on your chair so that the back of your legs are freer and that they're not fully supported by the chair. If you're standing, stand with your feet roughly hip width apart. So the knees and ankles are just dropped down under where these hip bones come out at the front. And I want you to check your legs. So if your legs are locked out and you're pushing your knees back, I want you just to soften them. So give them a little bounce. And then stand so that it feels like the legs are straight but not locked. And I want you to bring your awareness to your pelvis. So I'm going to put one hand into my lower back, one hand onto my tummy. And I'm going to think about sending the tailbone back and then tucking the tailbone under and then sending it back and tucking it under. Now, with my hands at the front and at the back, what I'm doing here is I'm sending a wee signal to my spine that I don't want it involved in this movement. If I didn't have that there, I could stick my tailbone out, push that forward, but the movement's actually coming from the back rather than from the pelvis. So can we send that tailbone back? Can we tuck the tailbone under? A little bit of movement back, a little bit of movement under, the knees staying soft so we're not locking them out. When we lock the knees out, that makes that movement even more difficult to do. So with that softness, forward and back. So if you're in your chair, your feet will be about hip width apart. And you're just doing the same thing. You're thinking about sending that tailbone back and tucking the tailbone under. When you're seated, it can be a little bit easier to get the movement going. So if you're really struggling doing that standing up, maybe come and sit down because you've got something to resist against that can help just get that movement started as we tuck and as we release. Now, if you're really stiff at the lower back or really stiff in and around the front of the hips, this movement might be really small to start with. So you're just exploring. If the movement is really stiff, what you can do is you can bring your hands onto the hip bones and then use the hands to push the hip bones forward and stick the tailbone out, and then use the thumbs at the back to push the pelvis down and lift those hip bones at the front. So sometimes that exaggerated movement just helps loosen off some of the tissue that's in around this pelvic area. Tucking it under and then sending it back and tucking it under and sending it back. And then bringing that pelvis into what we call in Pilates a neutral position. What that means is just where we're not sticking the tailbone out or driving it too far under, somewhere that feels like it's in the middle so that your back's in its natural curve. Your backside muscles will be engaged very slightly, but not so tight that you can hardly breathe. You just want them engaged to create a little bit of a shelf of support. And then I want you to think about that alignment again. So the ear over the shoulder, over the hip. How does that upper body posture then feel? Take a couple of breaths there. And just notice whatever there is to notice in your body. Now, if you've released off some parts that are tense, sometimes what can happen is muscles can start to cramp because they're not used to being moved or used to being worked. Now, I'm just going to very quickly do a tiny bit on our feet. If you can access your feet, so I'm just going to move this camera down a touch so that when I bring my foot up. So if you can get access to the sole of your foot, now you can have it resting on a chair in front of you, or you can have it on your knee if your hip allows for that movement. But when you touch onto your foot, I want you to first of all notice the temperature of your foot. So is your foot very cold, or is it just normal skin temperature? If your foot is cold, are there particular parts of your foot that are cold? When we've got cold feet, that's an indication either we've been walking about on a very cold floor or there is a circulation issue there. When we start to work into the feet, and I do a whole workshop just on feet, a 90-minute workshop. Our feet super important to help support our posture. When we notice the temperature of our foot, if the foot's really cold, then that means that there's not a lot of blood getting to the foot. That's then going to influence how well the muscles can or don't work. Important parts of your foot, this arch that runs from the ball at the big toe through to the heel. This medial arch here is one of your main shock absorbers in your foot. Some people have overpronation in their foot, which means that they're very flat-footed. This arch collapses. Some people also have very high arches that still don't move. Both of them are going to cause problems because if these shock absorber arches and your feet are not working, what happens then is it ricochets the impact through all the joints in your body. If your foot is unstable and can't stabilise, then your ankle has to do the job for you, which is then going to impact your movement, increases your risk of falling. But I want you to notice this arch and how high or flat the arch is, and if you press onto it, how pliable it feels. If you can't reach to your foot, you could do that against the edge of a chair. So probably not a soft chair, you probably want something a bit firmer to just press in and see how that feels. Then you're going to do the same thing on the pinky toe side. So from the pinky toe to that heel, there's another arch here. It's not as obvious as the arch on the big toe side, but you can have a feel around here and notice how that feels. Now, a really good thing to do is to look at the soles of your shoes, of the shoes that you wear most commonly, and notice how the shoes are worn down. That will tell you whether you tend to walk on the inside of your foot or the outside, or if you've got quite a nice balance. You just have a feel either with your hand or pressing against something to see how pliable that is. Now, the other thing that I like to talk about on the soles of your feet are your tripod points. So this is the pad at the heel, and then on the ball of your foot, pad at the base of the big toe, pad at the base of the little toe. What I want you to do is to place your foot down onto the ground I'm just going to bring this camera down again and check that you can see my foot. Come back slightly. And what I want you to do is to notice, lift your toes and then press your heel in, wiggle your foot about, and then bring the ball at the big toe down, and then bring the ball at the pinky toe down, keeping your toes up. And just notice how easy or challenging it is to get those 3 points down onto the floor. And then place all the toes down. And just get a sense of the sole of your foot and those tripod points as you're connecting in. And then I want you to do the same on the other foot. So your other foot might be completely different in how it looks, how it responds. So if you can feel into your arch, I want you to have a feel in and notice how this foot feels. Notice the temperature of this foot. This might feel like it belongs to somebody else. Notice the quality of the muscles as you're pressing in. So one foot might feel quite firm and sturdy, one foot might feel a bit more like a marshmallow and a bit squishy. Then go to that pinky toe side. Oh, let me just spin myself round again. Go into that arch on the pinky toe side. You have got 5 arches in your foot, but I don't have time to go into all of them tonight, so I'm just doing these 2 main ones. And then we're going to bring the heel down. And then can you bring the ball at the big toe, the ball at the little toe? Notice on this foot how easy or challenging it is to get those 3 tripod points connected here, and then place all the toes down. So I want you to have both your feet roughly in line with each other, roughly hip width apart, and those tripod points connected. And then I want you to stand back up again, thinking about those tripod points being connected to the floor, standing tall through the legs, so knees soft but not bent, not locked out, pelvis in that neutral-ish position, ribs stacked over, shoulder, ear, skull in alignment. Let me try and bring you back up without knocking everything over. And then for those of you that have done the movements and things, I want you to have a wee walk around your space again. And as you're walking around your space with this newly aligned posture that you have, notice what there is to notice. So as you're taking the steps, has the sound of how you land through your feet changed? Is the weight through each of your feet, is that any different? Do the muscles activate in a different way? Do you notice things in your body that maybe you didn't notice the last time? How is your breath as you're moving around that space? What I notice for myself is my feet feel a bit lighter and a bit springier. My movement feels like I'm rolling through my feet a wee bit more than sometimes we get that slap, 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 or elephant, 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 or shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. When I'm taking those breaths, my breaths feel a little bit fuller. I feel taller through the crown of the head. I'm lighter on my feet, feel a bit more balanced. Just as we're bringing ourselves back round, if anybody wants to share how they were feeling after that, whether you drop that into the chat or whether you want to, if you want to unmute yourself and say anything. If there was one particular part that you noticed felt beneficial, or did you notice anything different? Do you just feel exactly the same?
Hi Jen, I was just going to say, I felt like I was using all of my foot the second time. I think the first time you're very much on your heels, and I was more conscious of using the outside of my foot the second time.
Yeah.
Whereas at the beginning it was like heel first, heel and then a roll, heel and then a roll. Whereas
Mhm.
this time I felt my foot felt more balanced and
Okay.
used the whole foot. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. That's good. That's good. Somebody said that they weren't as slappy when when they were walking. Yeah, that's really, really common. And it's one of these things that we don't notice that we do until somebody asks you to pay attention um to how you're moving. Your feet feeling much better. We barely did anything on our feet there, which is really interesting, right? So we did lots of upper body stuff, not a lot of stuff in the feet, but we still impacted how we moved through our feet. More movement around the ribs. They're a little bit achy now, so that can happen. That sort of like achiness and pain if you've been really, really tight, and we start to move things around and start to open things up. They can feel a wee bit achy because the muscles can be tired, and they're like, "I've been really happy being in this crunched up little ball, and now you're asking me to move." So just make sure that you're really gentle. Keep your body moving. Make sure that you're taking on plenty of fluids to keep your body well hydrated, so that helps release it. Now, you might have used muscles that maybe you haven't used in quite a while, and that can sometimes give you a wee after effect the next day of a bit achy and a bit stiff. So just keep moving your body around, and that will help minimise any pain. You feel the springiness in your feet. Nice. Good. Let me just check if I missed anything. No, I don't think so. The neck and elbow. Yeah, the shoulders dropping, and that really um I remember the first time I was taught that, I was like, that's amazing. There's a crunch in the left side of your neck. So crunches can be what is referred to as adhesions in your body. So we have all these muscle fibers that sit and they crisscross all over each other. In between all of that is connective tissue or fascia. When we have postural habits, like I said earlier, what can happen is things can then get compressed and stuck together and it can create adhesions. Sometimes when you hear that crunching and clicking, it's those muscle fibers just stiff because there's not enough fluid getting through it. So fascia has its own fluid, then we've got blood flow, we've got lymph flow, all of that gets sticky and crusty. So when we're feeling crunches and clicks, sometimes I get crunches and clicks even though I do movement stuff all the time, because then I sit while I'm on the laptop, I'm into one side, or if I'm sitting on the sofa watching something, I can be crunched in. And then when you start to move around, it's like, oh, all these tissues I've got jammed together. So that's just them easing out. But I will also caveat that with anytime you're doing anything, if you go, oh, that's crunching and clicking and it's really, really painful, then make your movements smaller and ease into it. Trying to go too big, too hard can cause more trauma within the tissues and then make you really painful afterwards. I always would rather it took longer to release something, so go slow and steady and easy, than try and go in hammer and tong and then causing yourself more disruption and then you don't want to do the movement again. If that all makes sense. Anything else? Yeah, the magic years is amazing. That and it's such a simple thing to do. That rolling just helps ease and free things out. Yeah, it's one of my favorite tricks.
I was going to say, Jen, I liked that trick as well. The
Yeah,
difference that made was incredible.
yeah, it's easy. Yeah, it's definitely somebody saying there that they can look over their shoulder and their neck's not as crunchy. It's such a good and simple thing to do, and I also find that really relaxing to do because there's all these acupressure points and you can feel into any part. Like I was just focusing on that unrolling there, but as you're doing this, you can work more deeply. You can get right into the pads and around the ear. You can really touch onto any part. And because there's so many acupressure points and there's nerve endings here that influence everything in your body. It's just, yeah, for some people, it's like, oh, I could just fall asleep while I'm doing this. So if you're really stressed, sitting playing with your ears can just help soothe and calm you down, which is a win-win.
definitely. Does anyone else have any more questions or comments on Jen's session? That was really great, Jen. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I'm just going to pop Jen's website, Facebook, and her YouTube channel into the chat box if anyone wants to take a closer look at what she does. I'm sure you do, because that was really enjoyed that. Anne says thank you, enjoyed it as well.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Okay. If no one else has anything, I might just end the call now. Thank you so much, Jen.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you,
Yes,
ladies, for
thank you.
attending tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Right, have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.